Well, it's good to be back with you again. This is Jay Smith. I'm speaking, as you can see, from Speaker's Corner in the background here. It's a rainy day. We don't have that large a crowd. And I want to talk specifically about the Bible and the accusations that are coming up from a lot of Muslims here at the corner and also on YouTube concerning the two testaments, the Old and the New Testament. Do we have two different Bibles? Is it one that's a newer rendition of the Old? Now, to answer that, let me just help Muslims to understand real quickly that the Old and the New Testament are both authoritative. You go to both the Old and the New. But the New Testament is a fulfillment of the Old Testament. One follows the other for a very good reason. The Old Testament lays the groundwork. It is the foundation from which the New Testament is dependent on. When Christ, in his ministry, over and over again, refers to the Old Testament, it says, "You have heard it say, but now I say." You have heard what was sent to Moses and the other prophets, but now I say in the New Testament. So it is not only a fulfillment, it is basically everything the Old Testament was pointing to. And the Old Testament, if you look at all the 36 books that are there, they are pointing to a man. They are pointing to the Messiah who is yet to come. They are pointing to this Messiah who would be part of the chosen nation that comes from the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He was to come, for a specific reason. He was to come to save people from their sins. And this was supposed to be sent out to the whole world so they could hear it. Now that was done in the form of Jesus Christ. We know about over 300 prophecies in the Old Testament that refer to Jesus, specifically to him. What do we do then with the Old and the New Testament? It's very important that we hold and we keep the Old Testament in its time framework. It belongs to a period from 1500 BC all the way up to the time of Christ himself, the first century. And therefore, we don't go to the Old Testament to know how we're to live today. I've said this over and over again. I'll keep on saying it. It's very important that we therefore do not go to the Old Testament to know what we're to do concerning hygienic laws, to know what we're to do concerning things like sacrifice or circumcision. We don't do that anymore. That all has been fulfilled in Jesus Christ. The New Testament is a new covenant. Maybe a better way to say it. At the same token, Muslims need to be careful because then they consider the Qur'an as yet another New Testament, a newer testament, or a newer covenant. That's where the analogy falls to pieces. There's nowhere in the Bible, in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, a reference to a further revelation. There's any verse in either of the two covenants that talk about another prophet that's yet to come. There's no reference at all to Muhammad or to the Qur'an, as much as Muslims would like to say there is, and as diligently as they are striving to look in the Old Testament to find those references. And they go to Deuteronomy 18, and they go to Song of Solomon 5:16, and they go to John chapter 14 and John chapter 16. We'll deal with that in another video and just answer every one of those claims. I am convinced, and certainly, hopefully, after this, you will be convinced that there is no reason for another testament. There is no reason for another prophet. It's all been fulfilled in Jesus Christ. That's the beauty of looking at the two covenants. When you look at the Quran, you will see it contradicts so much of what's come before. It contradicts not only who God is, it contradicts what sin's all about, it contradicts what salvation is, it contradicts concerning who Abraham is or what his mission was, it contradicts certainly who the person of Jesus Christ is, and doesn't and will not even admit that Jesus Christ died on the cross. For these reasons, it is not a further revelation. It is not a further covenant. It does not belong to the line of covenants that you find through all the different prophets and then fulfilled in Jesus Christ. We only need those two testaments, those two covenants. We, as Christians, therefore look to the New Testament as our authority. We go to that covenant that fulfills everything that has come before. And that is enough because everything's there. We don't need anything more after Jesus Christ. We don't need anything more after the New Testament and the Gospel. And because of that, Muslims need to understand that the New Testament is absolutely foundational for everything we're going to say. We don't throw away the Old Testament. There's no contradiction between the two. One sets the stage, creates the platform, announces he who is going to come, God, who is going to be called Emmanuel, God with us, known as the Son of God, known as the Son of Man in Daniel 7:14, and then of course fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And it's that Jesus we want to get you to know. It's that New Testament, his revelation and about him that we want you to read. Because until you will not understand that everything in the Bible is fulfilled in the New Testament. We therefore don't need the Quran nor Muhammad. We just need Jesus. Come on home, and let us tell you about him.